It's funny, I think it's less the conditions in the society that make me think about public value than the kind of person you are. And if you're a certain kind of person who's looking around the society and worrying about whether things are going well or badly, then you're a person who's interested in public value because you're constantly assessing both your own situation as well as that of others to see whether there's anything you could imagine doing that would improve conditions for you and the other people and all of us together. So there's always plenty of work to do in trying to improve society. The only interesting question is which pieces am I going to try to concentrate on? So the idea of public value is just a concept that directs your attention to conditions in the world that you'd be interested in improving. And when you're thinking about what conditions you might be interested in improving, you could look at individuals and the state in which they're living, and you could be concerned about their economic welfare, the quality of the relationships they have to one another, the way in which they engage with the political system. And those would all be observations made at the individual level. But you could also be concerned about aggregate conditions in the society, some of which could be the physical conditions of the society, both the natural environment and the man-made environment. But then you want to eventually turn your attention back to some of the social conditions, which would be scaled up from the individual experience, and you'd be talking then about total levels of economic prosperity, total levels of civility in the society, total levels of political engagement in the society. Any of those larger spheres and the particular pieces within each of those spheres could become the focus of your concern. You could be interested in the victimization of women by their domestic partners. You could be interested in the ability of immigrants to be able to find a place in the society and to develop a capacity for employment and become good citizens. You could be interested almost anything that attracts your attention that is about something other than your own material well-being is what I mean by public value. So I think an important part of thinking usefully about creating public value is not only having an idea about a condition that could be improved, but also imagining what would be necessary to actually produce the desired improvements. And that gets you out of the world of speculation and into the world of material reality and the way in which you could mobilize resources and the way in which those resources could be deployed to accomplish the goal. To help with that, we developed a very simple framework that we call the strategic triangle. And the strategic triangle identifies on the one point of the triangle the idea of public value or the particular conditions you hope to change. And then it has at another point of the triangle the operational capacity you would need to accomplish that goal. And that refers principally to the whether and how material assets could be deployed to change the conditions that we're interested in. Those conditions, again, could be material conditions. A person could be hungry, and the question is how to feed them. A person could be oppressed, and the question would be how to protect them adequately. So there's always some mechanical or material process that's involved in producing those end states, and that's the focus of operational capacity. And then there's the last question, which is how can I get legitimacy and support for this? And legitimacy is important because you might want to be reassured that you're doing something that not only you think is valuable, but other people think would be valuable. You might want to be protected from people who are opposed to what it is that you're doing and try to make sure that you had some legal protection that would allow you to carry on. But you might also need some money to pay other people to help you with the work, or you might need some authority or moral authority to help persuade other people to help you with the work. And so all of that is associated with the idea of building legitimacy and support for the purpose that you have in mind, because you can't accomplish very much on your own, and there are a lot of other people who are in a position to help, and you might as well figure out how much they're prepared to do to help. Legitimacy and support and operational capacity as I described a minute ago, are the material resources and their deployment in order that are required to produce the desired effects on the objective states in the world. And people have a little difficulty with that because maybe the distinction between them isn't always that clear. But the critical difference is the legitimacy and support circle is concerned with the mobilization or the marshaling of assets that can be deployed. And the operational capacity part of the circle is a description of the concrete methods that are to be used to deploy those assets to accomplish the result, right? So to make it simple, if I were trying to accomplish something in the public sector and I needed some money to do it, somebody in the authorizing environment would have to give me tax dollars in order to accomplish that result. But then I would also have to know enough about the problem that I'm trying to address and its causes that I would know how to deploy those assets and activities that would actually produce the desired result. Both the legitimacy and support and operational capacity are the things that bring you down from the aspiration to achieve something to the hard questions about, well, okay, but how am I going to get it done in this particular environment from this particular position? And that focuses your attention on where the resource is going to come from and how are they best deployed. I think probably the most important development is the recognition that this little strategic triangle and the concept of public value, which I developed originally to help government managers imagine what was possible from their positions and how they might use those positions to create something of value, gradually widened out. And as I went through my life and career, I began encountering not only government managers, but also managers in the voluntary and nonprofit sector. They also found this little strategic triangle and the concept of public or social value useful. And then I went a step further and got interested in the idea of social entrepreneurship and discovered that even people who weren't standing on an organizational platform but were imagining that they could construct an organizational platform that would do some work for them also found the concept useful. So I think gradually my sense of the variety of positions within which this idea would be helpful widened out. Related to that is also the idea that increasingly, of course, we're trying to solve problems that cut across the boundaries, not only of single organizations, but also of sectors, whether it be for-profit, nonprofit, and government. And the question is whether the strategic triangle could be used to analyze the challenge of building a network of capacity and deploying that across organizations to accomplish a purpose. And the answer turns out to be useful for that as well. So I think what's happened over time is that as I've used the concept, it's become wider in its usages, all right? And the number of things that I now understand about how to define public value, how to measure it, the variety of ways that one could think about producing it, the sources of legitimacy and support and the kind of assets you need have all deepened so that there's a sense in which not only I but other people now working with this concept have both broadened the use of the strategic triangle and the idea of public value and deepened our understanding of each element of it. One of the things that was always in the background of the strategic triangle that has been thrust into greater prominence and of greater concern is precisely the connection between the strategic triangle and the quality of citizenship and public deliberation that lies behind the definition of public value. In the idea of legitimacy and support, there was always a big chunk of politics, but for the most part, it was the politics of policy making or of organizational positioning. It wasn't the politics of the mobilization of citizens for the achievement of desired results. I just ran 2 programs, actually, last year, which I called Recovering the Public and Public Value. And those all addressed themselves to the question of exactly how we would have to adapt the concepts of the strategic triangle to give particular attention to the variety of contacts and transactions that government had with its citizens in order to, and the effect that that would have on the future prospects for democratic decision-making. And I became very intrigued by the set of arguments developed by John Dewey, who described the important challenge facing democratic leaders was the challenge of calling a public into existence that could understand and act on its own interests. And if you thought of that as a function that had to be performed not only in elections, but across the government in policy-making activities and consultations with citizens and stuff, it became pretty important as part of the idea of creating public value. Because when you think about it, it's important to realize that a public doesn't exist naturally, and particularly not in a liberal society. In a liberal society, we want to live most of our lives as individuals and as private individuals, not as a public. But every now and then, in a liberal society, we have to get together as a public. And the times when we have to do that are the times when we elect our representatives, but also the times when we decide exactly how we're going to use our collectively owned assets of the state in a variety of different public actions. How managers and political executives can engage citizens in the process of defining public value, and through that apparatus not only get a better picture of what public value is, also get help in producing it, but also create in the minds of the people who participated a sense of citizenship that they had previously lacked. And so that's sort of a frontier that we're spending a lot of time on these days, and hope to have more to report on that later.